Okay, serious question. How is it that no one died making Mad Max Fury Road? George Miller and his collaborators wrote these words. The buzzard rolls, goes in under the war rig, and is crushed violently. The excavator retaliates. It powers into the back of the assault car, thud, flips it over, and grinds it against the side of the war rig. The assault car disintegrates. Then he went and shot exactly that with real cars and real drivers in the middle of the desert. And let me reiterate, no one died. Action! Teeming with practical effects and insane stunts, Fury Road has been hailed for its bold shift away from computer-generated visuals, harkening back to Miller's original 1979 classic. But it doesn't take a critical eye to spot where Miller leaned on modern CGI effects to create, modify, and improve the visuals of Fury Road. In fact, his willingness to merge the practical with the digital proves that we are in the golden age of special effects. This is The Breakdown. Filmmakers have always sought out the best methods for crafting believable images on screen. From the medium's inception, filmmakers have used practical effects like forced perspective and miniatures, along with technology such as George Méliès's stop trick, to create realistic illusions. And as both the art form and technologies advanced, directors and craftsmen became better and better at using these tools to both entertain and amaze audiences. Each decade saw the emergence and adoption of new techniques like the inclusion of stop-motion animation, rotoscoping, puppetry, and eventually computer-generated imagery. But even as filmmakers saw their toolbox expand with a variety of new computer-aided special effects, tried and true practical effects, trick angles, wirecraft stunts, specialized prosthetics, and makeup never really went away. If anything, they've been with us the entire time, just under our noses.
Chubby digits!
In 1977, when George Miller, Mel Gibson, and a bunch of punk rockers started filming Mad Max, they weren't creating the first smash and crash car film, but the little Australian film quickly developed a cult following. By the release of its sequel, The Road Warrior, Miller had used dangerous and exciting practical effects to build a global phenomenon. Populated with colorful vehicles and characters, The Road Warrior defined the Mad Max aesthetic by leaning heavily on practical effects, crazy stunts, and vivid art direction. In the years that followed, other post-apocalyptic films utilizing mocked-up vehicles and practical effects would often be branded with the Mad Max moniker. Mad Max at Sea, Mad Max on a horse, Mad Max plays baseball. Okay, mostly it was just Kevin Costner trying to keep up with Mel Gibson. But over the next decade, computer technology and the ability to render realistic graphical effects gradually gained share in the industry, eventually displacing many common practical effects in the industry. Utilizing CGI, filmmakers could create visuals that were more complex, limited not by physics and physical capabilities, but by the imagination of the artist. The rise in popularity of computer-generated imagery tore a rift in the fanboy population, with some purists taking a strong critical stance against the emerging technology. And in the early cases, they had some grounds to gripe. The new technology may have allowed filmmakers to push visuals to the brink of reality, but it wasn't exactly seamless, nor was it always believable. See Mad Max in Space. Early digital effects lacked the decades-long expertise and finesses seen with practical effects. It wasn't until Terminator 2: Judgment Day, Mad Max with killer robots, that the general populace became aware of the full capabilities of digitally enhanced special effects. A few years later, Spielberg's Jurassic Park, Mad Max with dinosaurs, fully articulated the power of CGI in filmmaking. From that point forward, digital effects-heavy pictures became a mainstay in the box office, and to this day, the highest-grossing films rely heavily on computer-generated imagery to create their visuals. Special effects purists, however, appreciated the artistry and skill required to pull off a stunt or practical effect in the real world. The timing, choreography, and expertise necessary to execute a special effect, paired with the excitement of real humans in believably dangerous situations, became a draw in and of itself. Wireworks, car chases, realistic gore, they've always been the mainstay of practical effects. And some fans and filmmakers embrace this aesthetic wholeheartedly, but other effects like animatronic puppetry, the use of robotics, became a niche interest, and were soon displaced by cheap and abundant digital imagery. Computer-generated effects also proved to be safer. Tragically, the occasional stunt effect resulted in real harm, such as the early loss of Brandon Lee, who died after a prop gun accidentally fired a projectile on the set of The Crow. Producers saw CGI as a way to circumvent dangerous filming environments, and the technology allowed them to achieve never-before-seen images. So while The Crow may be marred by tragedy for a fatal practical stunt, it is also recognized as the first use of a digital character replacing a deceased actor. But practical effects never went away, and as CGI progressed, more and more filmmakers would go back to the well of classic camera tricks and practical effects to cheaply, convincingly create their films. Peter Jackson's extensive use of models and forced perspective in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Mad Max and Middle-earth, demonstrated that 100-year-old camera tricks were still a great way of creating unique visuals. By the time 2012 rolled around, George Miller, who was done making digital effects-heavy movies about talking animals, see Babe, Mad Max with Livestock, and Happy Feet, Mad Max in the Arctic, was ready to finally return to his practical effect roots. Having been waylaid for almost 2 decades by rights issues and other commitments, Miller returned to the world he had created 30 years prior. But this time, he had the money, the technology, and the talent to pull it off in spectacular fashion.
We didn't breathe for 8 months making this film. There's a great challenge, just logistically, trying to dramatize a story that's in constant movement is very, very tricky.
Fury Road immediately stood out for its high-concept car chases and over-the-top stunts. And Miller doesn't waste any time putting practical effects on full display. Yes, those are real cars flipping, smashing, and crashing. Yes, that's real fire spewing from moving cars. The buzzard really rolls. It goes under the rig and is crushed violently. The excavator really does retaliate. It powers into the back of the assault car, flips over, and grinds against the side of the war rig. The assault car disintegrates. Those are real stunt actors hanging from poles, those are real explosions, and that's really Tom Hardy on the front of that car. George Miller did it, and he didn't kill anyone. But he didn't do it without a fair amount of strategically placed digital enhancements. Certain effects like Furiosa's mechanical hand, Immortan Joe's compound, and the Desert Storm sequence are obvious uses of digital replacement. But there are subtler examples throughout. Digital processes were used to create day-for-night effects. Explosions were enhanced, and computer-generated bodies were added to crashes. All in, Miller employed over 2,000 visual effects shots throughout the film. Digital and practical effects were married in a very successful union, and that is why we're living in the golden age of visual effects. So, what are you supposed to take away from all of this? First, appreciate the long strides and accomplishments witnessed over a century of filmmaking. Early practical effects and early CGI may seem clunky and obvious by today's standards, but each technique required years of testing and refining to evolve from a primitive state. Next, understand that the practical versus digital argument was always a false dichotomy. Both technologies have always been used in conjunction to the best of their capacities, and as audiences, we're reaping all the rewards. And finally, fanboys, the Mad Maxes of internet forums, are loud and obnoxious. Just because they didn't like the use of digital effects in Star Wars doesn't mean the rest of us shouldn't enjoy it. Consider where practical and digital effects might take us next. Have we really reached the height of their capabilities? And will a new technology eventually disrupt these special effect techniques, only to eventually converge for a whole new visual experience? Only George Miller knows. Thanks for watching, y'all. If you have any other examples of films that have artfully blended digital and practical effects, leave some examples in the comments. We'd love to get a conversation going. Thanks again for watching. See you next time. This is The Breakdown.